It is on, yes. Planning board meeting for Town of North Smithfield for Thursday, December 9th is called to order at 7 PM, 7:01 to be exact. First order of business will be our roll call. Mr. Fournier?
Here.
Ms. Punchak?
Here.
Mr. Keane?
Here.
Mr. Menard?
Here.
The chair is here, Ms. Kennedy and Mr. Porter are not. With that, I'll jump ahead and just say that therefore our voting members are the 5 of us.
Just FYI, Ms. Kennedy wasn't reappointed.
Oh, did that happen already?
That did happen.
Oh, okay, that's right, yeah, December 1st.
Yeah.
So right now, we have an opening for
We
one
have
of
an
our,
opening
for our second
for an
alternate.
alternate, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, so next on the agenda is to review the minutes from, is that the November 18th meeting? Give you a couple of minutes to look those over and provide any comments or questions on that. Anything?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we accept the minutes as submitted.
Okay, we have a move, and we have a second to accept as submitted. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. All right. All right, next on the agenda, disclosures. Any planning board member have anything to disclose about the matters before the board this evening? Hearing none. Disclosure and notice, any members have any ex parte communications about any contested or material adjudicatory facts or opinions regarding the projects before the board this evening? No? All right. With that on, I already covered the voting members. I do think we should rearrange the schedule one bit, so I'd like to, I'll make the motion to cover item 7, which is a change, which is regard to High Rocks, to cover that ahead of the Edward Avenue thing, for the reason it's gonna be a continuance, so. Okay. So Bobby, have you got that? So I'm sorry, I made the motion to move item 7 to be ahead of item 6.
You're amending the agenda.
Yes, and we got a second for Mr. Fournier. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, okay. So with that, item 7, now item 6, is major change to recorded plan or flat, the High Rocks condominiums. Do you want to give a background on this, Mr. Planner?
So the background on this is a project that's been, was approved back in 2008, 2009. It's been built out more or less over a number of years, and as it was going through the process, there were issues related to the low to moderate income units being throughout the development and permitted through the town. So there was, as the project was being built out, there was minimal oversight, and the units that were supposed to be built and reserved for low to moderate did not come to fruition. I guess over several years, there were several attempts by the developer to resolve that through numerous ways, including at some point, I believe the developer came before this board and asked for an additional number of units to be built, which were all to be dedicated for low to moderate income. That received the master plan approval from the planning board and subsequently was denied by the zoning board. From that time forward, I think the applicant or the applicant's attorney has been in negotiations with the developer and the developer's attorney to try to resolve the issue. At some point in the past year or so, there was an amendment to the Code of Ordinances for the town, which I think is in your packet, amendment to Section 1064, which authorizes, under the Code of Ordinances, this development to have 133 units with 3 LMI units. The applicant has applied to the planning board to get a major change to the approved plan, and that's what they're here for. I think there's someone here to represent the applicant in the audience, and that's
Right.
what I have at this point.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Charles Redding. I'm here on behalf of High Rocks LLC. We're just requesting a continuance of the hearing to amend. Requesting a continuance on the application to amend the final plan. I do have an affidavit of notice to the applicable parties for this evening's hearing, as well as a formal letter I can present for the file requesting that continuance. Mr. Hurley, who has been representing High Rocks for my firm, had an emergency matter to attend to in the state of Florida. He's unable to attend this evening, regrettably, and for that reason, my client requests that we continue this to January.
To the standard January meeting.
Standard January meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it's a technicality. I think if the board would like to avoid renotice and re-advertising, that you would need to open the public hearing and then continue it to a date certain for anyone here in the audience who might like to speak on this item before the board. Otherwise, you'd have to renotice the hearing for the January meeting.
Doesn't that put the onus on the public to remember that this is going to be?
It does put the onus on the public to remember, Mr. Chairman. You are correct.
And I'm not sure that that's fair to the public.
That's the prerogative of the board.
Yeah, so
It's the prerogative of the board, Chairman.
Anybody here tonight for the?
I think just this gentleman.
I think it was known for the,
His eyes look familiar.
I think it was,
Yes, he is here.
I think it was, the word was out that it was going to be a continuance, so I'm not sure that we can, I'm not sure that we can predict that there'd be more, so. You're busy building things. So,
Does the onus of notification come on the board, or on the town, or on the owner?
no, on the owner,
It would be on the applicant.
on the
Then
applicant, I should say.
I have to agree with the chair that
Yeah,
no continuance.
okay. So we'll require a renotice.
Certainly,
Okay.
Certainly.
Thank you. On that, any issues the board have with the continuation? Okay. Do we need to vote on this, on accepting it?
You do.
Okay. So we'll do we need a motion to accept.
Motion to accept the request for a continuance until the standard January 2022 meeting.
And if you could add to that with required notice?
With required
Thank you.
notice and public hearing.
Correct.
I'll second.
So we have motion, we have a second. Comments? No? Roll call vote, Mr. Fournier,
Yes.
Mr. Punchak,
Yes.
Mr. Keen,
Yes.
Mr. Menard,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
thank you. I do have the affidavit of notice and a formal request I can
Yeah, if you
submit.
could give that to the assistant planner, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just ask what the date would be in January, do you know that?
It'd be the second Thursday.
I think it's the 13th.
The second Thursday?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The 13th,
You get that?
January 13th.
Okay. So now, next on the agenda, bond reduction, Edward Avenue Road Extension. The developer has requested a bond reduction for the extension on Edward Avenue. Request was last before the board on March 21st, and at that time, we had questions related to the request, but you give us a little quick summary on that, Mr. Carrillo?
You don't want it done? It's the bond reduction. I didn't know if you wanted to do it. Okay. Yeah, so the planning board back in, I think it was January, at some time received a request for a bond reduction. And at that time, the board had a hearing and had several questions. I think they're in your packet with regard to issues related to the bond reduction, including granite-bound street lighting, hydrant, street sign, lumen seed, and other items. Since that time, the developer has moved forward to resolve the majority of those items. The DPW director has been out to the site, and he confirmed that the site was in acceptable order. We also, yesterday, received a report from Joe Casale Engineering that was submitted to DEM that provided an as-built approval of the drainage system. Planning staff, Bobby actually went out to the site, and I think in your packet, there are pictures of some of the pertinent items that the planning board had questions on to verify that they were in fact installed in the field. So based on all of that information that has been provided, the planning office is recommending a bond reduction, and at the request of the DPW director, we're asking you to retain the amount of $35,000.
Anything the applicant wants to add to this? Nope.
You
Any
know, I
questions?
have some.
I figured you would. That's why I looked to you.
All right, so one thing that was brought up the last time and seems to have been missed here was that the board approved a 5-lot subdivision. However, infrastructure for 6 lots was installed. There's 6 curb stops out there and presumably 6 sewer laterals. So, that begs a few questions as to A, why did that happen? The development initially came to us as 6 lots, and the 6th lot was transferred to an abutter. So it came back to us as 5 lots.
Just to, due to the, the motivation for that was the requirement for affordable housing, right? At 6, 1 was required, at 5, none were required.
So the 6th lot was transferred to an abutter. So it came back as 5 lots, was approved as 5 lots. You go out there, just like I said. So my questions would be, A, what happens if that 6th lot is re-subdivided and built? Did we circumvent state law by putting the infrastructure in now, even though it's not approved? B, the whole time this was going on, and part of the justification for, some of the relief we granted was that he was gonna tie into the sewers. Well, as opposed to putting in septic. So did we base our assessments on all of the residents in that neighborhood on 5 additional lots or 6 additional lots? If it was only 5, did the abutter pay twice to have a sewer service to one piece of property? So this was discussed at the first time this came before us, and for some reason it got overlooked, and I think Mike even said, well, was it at the request of the sewer and water department, and that was supposed to be followed up upon. However, there's no closure to that as of right now, in my opinion.
Okay, so I don't know the details of what had happened previously. I'm hearing what you're saying, so I can address what I can address. There is no state regulation with regard to providing access to utilities. So with regard to stubbing out either a sewer, a lateral, or a water connection, there's nothing in the state regulations that prohibit that. So that there would be no violation there. With regard to the lot, and I hear what you're saying, it was originally submitted for 6 lots, and then it apparently came back for 5 lots. If I'm hearing you correctly, I'm not sure that I understand exactly what happened. You're saying the 6th lot was either deeded over or sold to an abutter. Do you know, and I don't know because it's the first I'm hearing of this, if that lot was merged into that adjoining lot, or was it purchased as a separate lot?
I don't know if it
Okay.
was purchased. We did
believe it
see a
was.
subdivision, and from what I remember, it
Yeah.
was merged into
So,
the,
so it's very, the distinction is very important here, and maybe if the developer's here, he can shed some light on it. But if the sixth lot was merged into an adjoining lot to create one lot, that any subsequent subdivision of that lot would constitute a minor subdivision, would have to come back to this planning board for authorization and approval. So that would be the check on that. If it was just purchased as a lot and it exists as a separate lot adjoining that lot, then it would not come back to this planning board.
Which would be your concern. So you're
For-
saying,
for-
right, you're saying
yeah.
if it was retained, if it retained its identity as a separate lot.
Yes, if it retained its identity as a
So-
separate lot and they just bought it as an adjoining lot and it was not merged in, then it's a standalone lot and it would not come back here for any subsequent approvals.
Right.
And I
So I
think
would-
that's key to your question.
Well, so I would, Mr. Godfrey's here. so
Yeah.
we could-
if it was
Why don't we-
merged.
why don't we have-
If it was merged, they didn't.
Why don't we have Mr. Godfrey,
Yeah, I don't know that.
could you please, yeah, because, yeah, please, it ties into the electronics so people offline can see it. And just do the format, state your name, et cetera.
Philip Godfrey, residence 47 Homecrest Avenue, here to speak about the extension of Edward Avenue. Originally, the subdivision was shown as a 6-lot subdivision. Prior to master plan being submitted to this board, with the supervision of Tom Kravitz, and after the adjacent or the abutting neighbor expressed an interest in Lot 6, I explained to him that I couldn't divide out Lot 6 because the road hadn't been, the plan hadn't been approved and recorded, and those lots didn't exist yet. Prior to submitting, officially submitting the 5-lot subdivision, we prepared an administrative subdivision merging what would have been Lot 6 to the adjacent neighbor's property. And you need to understand that I couldn't convey what was shown as Lot 6 on that concept plan
Right,
because the road didn't exist, the plan hadn't been.
but you could sell off the
Square footage,
square footage, right?
the frontage and the square footage.
Right.
And let me flash forward.
And I just want to get clarification, this is for me, is that, you said it was done as an administrative subdivision?
Tom Kravitz approves and
Right.
signed off, it's on record.
But so does that-
Anybody can go to
So-
town hall and see that that
Oh,
plan is
oh,
on
that-
record.
He's just asking you to confirm
Yeah, I'm just asking.
whether it
if
was
that-
an administrative subdivision.
and
That's
so-
all.
Yeah, and therefore,
Well,
does it fall into that
Sometimes
category?
things come across as being accusatory.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, he's
I'm
not.
I'm just trying to understand, does that put it in the category of the lots merging versus separate lot,
Yeah,
correct? Okay, thank you.
And I must add, there was some talk that something was done illicitly. Nothing was done
Well,
illicitly.
it was sold, I mean, that's recorded, that's
It was
fine.
sold, it
Yep.
was sold to the abutting neighbor. We subsequently designed a 5-lot subdivision and came back
Right,
to the planning board, and the planning board approved the 5-lot
right.
subdivision.
So what, I think the main thing, tell me if we may have answered the question, which is, now we know that that square footage was added to an existing lot through sale, which is fine.
Through an
Therefore-
administrative subdivision.
And therefore, if that stub for the sewer and water and all that was ever to be used, it would require subdividing that old lot, correct? Because that old lot has a house on it, and it has this additional square footage, which was the theoretical Lot 6, right? But in other words, to use that, what I'm hearing is, was, the second option that Mr. Carullo brought up, which is that it would have to come before the planning board because whoever owns that property would have to say, hey, we want to split it in two and put a second,
And come before this board.
right, okay. So that. So it's only one lot? Right now, it is just a single lot. It just happens to have a connection, a live connection and a stub.
Well, I can also address that.
Okay,
Okay. There aren't 6 water services, there are 7.
okay,
Because as requested by Russ Carpenter, when we were extending the water line, Mr. LaFave who is the abutting neighbor on the other side of the street, has an artesian well. He was never tied into the water.
Ah,
There was no water line there.
right,
Russ Carpenter recommended, Phil, while you're extending the water line, why don't you afford him the courtesy and put in a curb stop for him?
right,
If he wants to tie in, he can tie in. If he doesn't want to tie in, he doesn't want to tie in.
right,
It would just avoid us having to dig up the pavement.
right, exactly,
That's what we did.
okay,
At the same time, Russ Carpenter, his credit, as the water superintendent, said, why don't you do the same thing across the street? I did it out of courtesy.
right,
In deference to Russ Carpenter. Just like we ended up putting in a fire hydrant. Now, if you go back into the record, you'll find that the fire marshal, Brian Gotlin at the time, stated, we did not need a fire
Yeah.
hydrant. He's got that on the record.
Uh,
However,
understood.
after the plan was approved and recorded, Russ came to me and said, Phil, we're gonna be repaving Parkview Drive and Edward Avenue.
right,
I would like to relocate or redistribute the fire hydrants and take the fire hydrant that currently is at the end of the original Edward Avenue
right,
and put it down at the corner where you used to live, where you grew up. So if you go there today,
oh, to where my parents' house was, yeah.
correct.
Okay.
And in place, you put a new fire hydrant at the very end of the
Right,
extended
to
cul-de-sac.
change the distances, right, but the,
We weren't required to put in a fire hydrant, but because Russ requested that he would like to have a better plan for the fire hydrants, I agreed to put the fire hydrant in.
So,
yeah.
just, not to, the drawings that were the DEM approval show a proposed fire hydrant, so it's not like, there was discussion, I thought the discussion was about 2 fire hydrants versus 1 fire
Yeah,
hydrant. Right
no,
here,
no,
it
it's-
shows that there's a fire hydrant at the, so you're not, you're trying to say you did a good thing, it wasn't there, but it's
But
there, it's shown
but
on the
the-
drawing.
No. What I'm saying, if you go
The
to
fire marshal
the
didn't
fire
originally
marshal's
require that.
letter, the fire marshal's letter stated that there was no fire hydrant required
It
because
could be a cistern.
there was already a fire hydrant at the end of Edward Avenue.
Right,
We were only extending the street 320 feet. It wasn't necessary to add a fire
He's-
hydrant.
he's just bringing out that the fire marshal himself didn't require it.
It was,
But
it
we
was
did,
joke,
And that's why it's on there, correct, that's all.
So
It was-
do
But
you
the
have
real-
that letter, Mark?
Oh, that'd be in the
I'll look
old
through the letter, I do
pack,
have,
but-
as,
But the
you
old,
know,
I,
as we're
we
here,
got
I
on
do
this
have the
topic-
administrative subdivision plan, so I have it here if anyone would like to see it.
I will say, we got on this topic not to talk about fire hydrants, but to talk about the, so, and I think we've answered the big concern that you raised, which is that, would they be able to circumvent proper process to tie into that additional sewer connection? And the answer is no, because it is now part of a single property, correct?
Correct.
And therefore would have to come before us as part of a subdivision.
Correct.
And building project.
All right,
So I just want to make sure that issue is
Yeah.
addressed.
That makes sense, so then I guess the question would be, did the abutter pay 2 sewer assessments? Because if it, from what I remember, the cost of this sewer line went drastically over budget. There was a lot of concern, and you know, even made the case that I could put in septic systems for substantially less than what I'm paying to connect these to the sewer. However, I'm gonna do this to, you know, help the town, so if everyone on the street paid based on 20 connections, and there's really 21 connections, where, you know, did we put in a free sewer lateral for this property, or did those fees get paid?
Those fees got paid by somebody
Or
else.
is everyone's assessment getting lowered in order to accommodate that 21st lateral?
The installation of the sewer line was taking place at the same time we were getting the approvals. Prior to the sewer commission finalizing the design, we told them that there was gonna be a 5-lot subdivision. So all of their numbers were based on a 5-lot subdivision, not 6.
So the question that probably can't be answered tonight
Yeah.
is whether or not it was, whether or not that lot was assessed to two
Twice.
versus one.
I-
I mean, that would be.
I can
the-
tell you.
But that doesn't really, that's really not
I
our
would- I was gonna say, yeah, I don't know that that has any bearing, certainly not on the bond reduction, um, or even on, you know, well, the project's been approved, but, so I'm not sure where to go with that, to be honest with you.
Mr.
I
Chair.
mean, I think you raised a valid concern perhaps for the residents of the neighborhood, but it's, I think it's outside the purview of what we're at least not meeting for this evening. Mr. Menard?
Just have a question, just prior to, or before we make a decision this evening, should some research be done to, in fact, ensure that that lot was merged on deed-wise square footage to the existing lot?
I have the plan.
Okay. And, yeah, but deed-wise, was it deeded as Lot X,
Well, I think.
and it's not allowed, just to ensure that it comes back to us for
Keep in
approval for
mind-
subdivision, that's my point.
Keep in mind that there was no lot to sell. There was only square footage. There was one very large lot, which was proposed to be subdivided. But but we hadn't approved any, nobody had approved anything, so it was conceptual. And prior to that, the square footage was sold to add to it. So it wasn't sold as a lot, it was sold as square footage, and therefore had to be merged in.
Okay, just want to ensure that, that's all, so that
Right.
it ensures that they have to come back to
Did
the
I get that
planning
right?
board
Yeah.
for subdivision, that's all.
Chairman, if the board would like to see the plan, I have the
Sure.
administrative subdivision plan here, signed by Tom Kravitz.
Yep,
Yeah.
that'd be helpful, sure.
Let's start from the center. I think this is the area of contention right here. This appears to be the boundary of the pre-existing lot. Line to be removed, and this becomes an L-shaped lot.
Right. I've got it, I've seen it.
Yeah, I have it from our DDL.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So it's one big lot.
Exactly, so now you get that bigger lot, that would need to be subdivided, would need to come before us, so we're good. Was there another part to your concern related to the bond reduction?
So maybe a solution to Dave's concern of, and I have the same concern, is that when, and just, I don't know if it can be recorded, so that if ever that lot is subdivided or comes in front of us for subdivision, for development of a different lot, that there would be a sewer assessment added to that lot at that time to cover the cost.
But that's not,
Isn't that part of any development? Isn't that part of the process for any any
That,
subdivision?
I'm not sure.
Any subdivision that wants to tie into sewer has to provide.
Right, but they
those.
already have a lateral sitting there, that's the point, so I'm just ensuring the
see.
fact that that lateral becomes used, that the town gets proper compensation for that lateral.
but it has to go before the sewer commission for approval to tie in. That's their, assessments and
Right.
fees, that's their purview,
Right.
not ours. This really.
Yeah, just
it's
because
really
it's a
not-
money issue, yeah.
just asking the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not, yeah, I agree with you that I think it's part of the sewer commission
I
thing.
just want to make sure we.
Because they want to
dot
tie
our i's,
in,
that's all, for future.
go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not really sure on how assessments work in North Smithfield, and I'll certainly review it and report back to the board if they desire, but there are two ways really assessments work. And assessments either work based on linear frontage, that a lot abuts a street and they get assessed per foot. I don't know if that's the way they do it in North Smithfield, or it's based on use. So, a different use would be assessed at a different rate. So as that lot exists as one lot, it would probably either have already been assessed or is being assessed as a result of the line going by the front of the house or the lot being able to tie in. So an assessment is basically a fee to have infrastructure running by or in front of your property, different than a user fee. So if the town is assessed on linear feet, then that property will be assessed on that linear frontage, and if they add it to the frontage, that frontage goes towards the assessment for that property. If it's based on lot, that's one lot, it will receive one assessment. And then as they subsequently, if they were to subdivide that lot, the new lot would be reassessed and that assessment would have to be paid to the sewer authority prior to them being able to tie in. Then after that become user fees and yearly rates and things like that that they pay.
So Mr. Godfrey can probably give us a specific answer. You built a house over there. When did you pay the sewer assessment?
What happened was Parkview Drive and Edward Avenue is being treated as a very small district upon itself. They took the total cost of installing the sewers and divided it by 23 houses. And we each got a sewer assessment per lot.
That's per lot then.
I've been paying, it came out to like 27,000 and change. I've been paying for 5 of those assessments. As I sell the lots, those assessments are being assumed.
So I guess you said 23, was it really 24?
No.
Or it was,
So what happened is 100% of the cost of that installation is being absorbed by a fixed number of households.
Existing households.
If that neighbor that bought that, what was the 6th lot, chooses to come back before the town to divide it at some date in the future, the town is gonna have to decide how they wanna charge him,
Right.
because the cost of installing the sewer in Parkview Drive and Edward Avenue has effectively been accounted for. So if
Right.
they chose to charge him the same amount that everybody else paid, which might be fair, I'm not rendering an opinion to that effect, but if he came forward to want to build a house and subdivide that out, the town would be in their power to charge him $27,000. Now, what the town does with that money is up to them. It's a windfall of $27,000.
Right. But it's, you know, I think as Mr. Keene pointed out, it's a decision for the sewer commission and probably the town council, and not for us.
It ended up being, in either case, it ended up being very painful.
Yes, that part we can all agree on, yes. Okay, any other questions, comments on the request for a bond reduction?
my only thing was the DEM inspection, which you had indicated you received, so.
Okay. So are we good?
I'm happy if Dave's happy.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
So we're all set. All right. Thank you, Mr. Godfrey. I think we're ready to make our vote, so. So we've got everything answered, and now, what do we need to do? Vote on whether
Need
we
to vote.
approve of this?
Motion and second and a vote.
Right, so, how does the board feel?
I'll move that we approve the reduction in bond as requested.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further comments? Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Fournier?
Yes.
Mr. Punchak?
Yes.
Mr. Keene?
Yes.
Mr. Menard?
Yes.
Chair votes yes.
So, do you issue a letter so that I can forward to the bond company?
You can-
Yes.
There you go. You're welcome, thank you. All right, so now, all right, so we did item 7, item 8. All right, discussion for, next on the agenda is the discussion for proposed planning board procedural changes, one of which you're looking at, which is a change in the format of how the information packets are presented, but so this comes as a result, so when Mark came on board, one of the first things that he did was meet with Jeff and I to, just talk, get to know how the planning board works, how it doesn't work, all the things about it. You'd already had input from Bobby, and we talked about these meetings in particular, because that's really where we get involved primarily. So we can talk about, so there's a few topics around that, including the, the presentation of the packet to us. And, to be honest, the intent was not to actually do that prior to this conversation, but that's okay, it's there now. And so we're beta testing it, as it were, and we can talk about what's good, what's not good, what we'd like to see change, but that's really the gist of it. Did you have did we have some specific categories of things we wanted to talk about, Mark?
Yeah, so I did provide a memo to the board. First of all, let me apologize for kind of morphing the old agenda into this new one prior to meeting with the board this evening. This is kind of like a hybrid that I put together, and please accept my apologies for that. It was not my intent to overstep. So with that being said, I did meet with Bobby. I met with the chairman and the vice chair. I spoke with the David Igliozzi, the planning solicitor. I also talked with the town administrator. And my process, the way that I do it as a planner, and different planners do different things, but the way that I do things as a planner is, you know, an applicant will come in and they'll speak with me. I'll review and advise them as to what I think needs to be done and what they'll be doing, whether their project complies, doesn't comply, where it does and doesn't comply, and then advise them whether I believe it's wise for them to move forward with an application to the board. And at that point, it's really their prerogative as to what they do. So what I would say to you is, up front, the planning staff puts a lot of effort and time into applications before they even reach the board, or before they even come to the planning department as a formal application. And as I was going through past practices and planning board agendas and decisions, I found it, especially the decision letters, difficult to determine the way the letter was written, what was actually approved. And if you look at the HYROX whole process and the decision letters related to that project, and the board's not responsible for writing the letters, so this is absolutely no reflection on the board. When I was reading the letters, I couldn't tell what was approved and what wasn't approved, what plan was approved, what plan wasn't approved. And so what I have done for many, many years is I start a process and I analyze the application and everything that the application is requesting and looking for. And I've provided you with a sample of a very complicated project that I went through in a previous life, where an applicant had come in. There was a piece of property there. It was a defunct restaurant. They wanted to rezone it to residential, build condos, abandon a street, and they needed a zone change. This was all in one application. So as they came in, I worked through the process with them and discussed it with them, and I advised them on how they should proceed. And if you look at what we've done here is, everything is spelled out in the planning board agenda in a description of what the applicant is looking for. In this particular one, it was a master plan approval, a zone change, and a street abandonment. And if you follow this through the process and the way that these are laid out, so, you know, I'll just start with the meeting notice. And the meeting notice clearly, in the body of it, states exactly what they're looking for and what they want, and it provides for you the findings that the planning department is required to make. And then it provides the planning department recommendation with numerous stipulations that have been discussed with the applicant and are a byproduct of, you know, my experience, my knowledge, and understanding as to, over time, what residents and neighborhoods are concerned. First thing everyone's ever concerned about, I'll just say this, in a development like this, or practically any development, is traffic, increased traffic. You know, you're always going to hear that. So through years and years of doing this, you kind of get an understanding as to what people are going to look for. There are unique circumstances, obviously, that'll come about through public hearings and whatnot, but as I'm going through it with the applicants, my first recommendation to the board is my first shot of what I really think the board needs to look at and what the project needs to make it be compatible and have the least detrimental effect on the adjoining community. And so the way I structure this is rather than submitting a meeting agenda and putting that on the Secretary of State's website and having very little detail other than a very brief description of what the project is, and then providing to the board a week before the meeting or so the planning department's analysis and sometimes recommendation, I guess. What I prefer to do is put that all into one document. And when that document gets posted, it's totally transparent to the applicant, the board, the abutters, what's being requested and what's being recommended, so that residents coming in have an understanding, the applicant has an understanding, the board has an understanding. And I find that over time, what this does is it eliminates a lot of the adversarial situations that you'll have before the board. It will let the developers know up front that there's certain things that they need to do in order to get their project approved. And it lets the residents know that the board in the town is actually looking out for their interests. And at times, it will probably eliminate some of their concerns and objections. I've had attorneys come in, and the attorney will come in, and they'll make their presentation to the board, and they'll say, we're happy with all of the stipulations that are being attached here. So I just find that transparency and that information up front to everybody actually gives all parties an understanding of what to expect and what's coming forward. Now, certainly during a meeting, things can happen, issues come up, and you can add or take away any stipulations that are being recommended. And this is simply my recommendation to the board, and it's the board's prerogative what they do. And if you follow this process through, the meeting notice to the meeting minutes, the meeting notices lend themselves to be transformed almost immediately into meeting minutes. And you'll notice on the meeting notice, there's actually an area where the votes are taken or accounted. And what I explained to Bobby is, if someone's not here, we just put a line through their name. Whoever makes the motion, you put a 1 next to it, a 2 next to the second, and you circle as the vote. So the very next day, you have an accounting. Now, the Secretary of State's office requires that within like a week or 2 weeks or something like that. We have it the very next day. If someone calls the planning office and says, how did the vote go or who voted, we have the record right there. And that gets easily transferred right into the meeting minutes. So if you follow that, you can see how that morphs right into the meeting minutes. And then from the meeting minutes, you can see that the decision letters are clear, tell you exactly what was approved, what the findings were, and what the stipulations are attached to it. And as these go forward, so if a project comes to the planning board and then goes to the zoning board, this document gets recorded in the land evidence records and gets forwarded to the zoning board as part of the application. And what I always recommend to the zoning board is that whatever stipulations the planning board attaches, that they put into their decision, and vice versa. If the zoning board adds stipulations to a special use permit decision, and that comes back for the planning board for preliminary or final, I make sure that those stipulations are incorporated into the planning decision, so that it is very clear when someone reads a decision letter, what was acted on, what relief there was, what the findings of the board were, and what the stipulations were. And if you follow what the requirements are for a sustainable decision, this decision meets those requirements, including having the findings in it. As I was going through the prior decisions, and as I said, the board doesn't write the decisions. Some of them were sustainable and some of them were not. Some of them had findings, some of them didn't. Almost all of them didn't explain to me what was approved. It just referred to High Rocks 2. So in order to find that, I'd have to go back to the minutes, read the minutes, see what the deliberations were, what the decision, what was approved, and then go over to the decision letter, and then, oh, by the way, go back and try to find the plan.
Right.
So to me, everything here is succinct, upfront. A lot of work gets done upfront. So that's a little more work for the Bobby said to me as we were going through some things that had been coming in and we were discussing. She goes, well, there's a lot of work that happens up front. I said, well, all the work that happens up front relieves a lot of the work as we move along. And the board has the benefit of that information coming to them.
You know, and I know we already went through this, but I think you're right, and the saving of time alone is worth a lot. My one comment, though, is that the structure of the document is difficult to use. It actually makes it a lot more difficult to follow along. Because normally what we would have, normally what you would have, and I like it if it can be an electronic document, that's great, but then you have an agenda. So for example, here, there's something like 11 pages between item 6, between item 7 and the material that supports item 7. So this is done as more like a serial stream of data. Here's your agenda, then we hit into it, and then here's all the supporting document for all the, for all the projects at hand. So if you mention putting it on the, so if you take that and you put that on the Secretary of State's website, and a resident goes to look at it, say they live in High Rocks, well, they see the High Rocks, now they have to flip through the stuff on Edward Avenue till they find stuff on High Rocks. Or if they just kind of see, like, do any of these projects mean something to me, they actually have to flip through a whole bunch of stuff. So what I would strongly recommend is, and I'd be happy to help Sean to do it, because I mean, we do this all the time in my industry, but is to have a structure that allows us to see the agenda more the way we've been used to seeing it, because it consolidates the agenda, but if you picture it on a screen as you're having the agenda here, and then you tap on the item, and then it brings you to that place in the document, and with a way to go back, and then you can navigate to where you want to go at any given time. Just from a,
So
It's-
you're
it's
talking
done with
about, you're
hyperlinks.
talking about an electronic presentation, and I would agree, I have no.
well, it's given to us in electronically, right? I have a PDF. And all we're talking about doing is, these would, when you generate the document, you can do this in Word and many other things, is that your table of contents, if you will. So if you look at the agenda, that top page as a table of contents.
Yeah.
Each project becomes a hyperlink to the section, to the chapter, if you will.
I would be very interested in learning how to do that.
Yeah, it's
I'm not
very
sure the
simple.
Secretary of State's website will host it that way, though.
They host-
They take,
don't
only
they-
take,
Don't they take a PDF?
they only take a PDF.
Right, and this gets all embedded into the PDF.
This-
The navigation gets embedded into the.
Okay, all right, well,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm
No, if you
fully
think
on
about it,
board
I
for
mean,
that.
I mean, if you go into any of, our user manuals, but this has been around for.
So you're,
It's
yeah.
something,
I think that's
it's-
quick, as you said, if you gotta,
Yeah.
looking for
Yeah,
highlights.
Gary, I-
you gotta
you
look
can
at
ask Carl,
five other things.
we get all these electronic documents for all the technology stuff, and some of these are hundreds and hundreds of pages.
Oh,
long, but you just
know,
tap and you go to
I
where
would
you want, and you come
I
back.
would love to
You know.
share your experience in that and learn from
Yeah,
your
this is-
experience on that.
this is,
That would be,
Because then you could still just have one page with all
I-
your topics, and then
Yeah,
you
except-
click on each
Right,
topic.
but these are hyperlinks out too.
yeah,
So you just,
I just don't know how to do it.
so it's very much like, right now, or even on our old ones, right, you would have a hyperlink which would take you to the website, right? Or you have the hyperlink to the YouTube video for it. This is the same thing. It is actually a hyperlink, but the hyperlink is within the same document. That's
I
the only
mentioned
difference.
to Bobby earlier today about there are packages that town council's clerk base does that, where they just put that, and I told if you go onto their web, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
if you click it, it takes you right to that portion of the
Right.
meeting where you can
And you don't
find
need
it.
anything special. I mean, you're just doing this in Word, right? I mean,
Yeah, I know, yeah,
This, like I said, this capability has been around for decades. So
well,
The
built
only
into things like
problem
Word.
with that is when you have to post it physically, we have to post it in 3 different locations.
yeah, well, we can,
But aren't you sending the same PDF to all 3 locations?
it's an actual manual posting with a thumbtack.
Yeah. We have to post
oh.
it at 3
It's all-
physical
yeah, but-
locations, it's a requirement.
But you know what? That's like, but even there, if you think about a book, okay, a book has a table of contents, and I have chapters, and then I flip through and I find the chapter.
I understand what you're
And
saying.
so, you know.
You'd have like the index would be the agenda, and the accompanying material would be behind it, even that
Right.
way. I've-
Except, and when you're looking at it electronically, you can tap and immediately go there. If you're looking at it on
Listen,
paper, you're gonna have a little more work.
I'm
to
on
do.
board, and if the board is on board with, electronic filings like that, and I see, a laptop there, and I see a laptop here, I use, I'm on the state retirement board, and we get thousands and thousands of pages, and it's exactly the way we use something called Convene, and we go on there, I click it,
Yeah.
and it takes me to the
But,
document.
yeah, but all they're doing is they're taking, they're embedding the same technology.
No, I
that's been in
understood.
all word processors, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
in.
I just don't know how to do that. So I'd be willing to
It's
learn.
something even I can do, so.
Well, then I must be able to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's my one big comment on the structure of it, because I do like having all the stuff, and
Yeah,
the other thing too is, it's up to us what versions of that we have, can annotate, can do all kinds of things, which is
If you're
nice.
willing to share that with us, we're willing to try
Not
to
a problem.
implement it.
I'm all for electronic, other than, the only thing I'd like to still see send out with the actual prints.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Because even
Right.
when I'm in business, when I bid a job, to look at a print on a laptop is painful.
Hmm.
Because they're always blowing up a little section.
Yeah, understood.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Forget where you are.
Exactly.
Now, can we, Bobby, I remember at one point when we, way back when we talked about who wants to receive prints, who doesn't want to receive prints,
Yeah,
I mean, going back at least 5 years. But do we have the capability, so for example, for me, because I don't have the construction and other knowledge, that just about everybody else here has. So I'm fine with a smaller version, and then looking at, you know, even zooming in on that, because I'm not gonna see the details you will. I d- Yeah, I don't see them, you know, so is it possible that you can, you know, because I remember, I thought it was you that kept track of, like, who wants to get real
Right.
plans, who doesn't?
We
And
did,
can it be something where you put a smaller version, say, into the electronic document, but only those that want the real size,
Yeah, well,
E-size drawings?
I'll take a little bit of credit for not doing that this time. Bobby was out last Friday when I sent this out, and normally, yeah, it would go out electronically and say, you know, whoever wants.
Yeah.
We would either bring it to the meeting, or we'd certainly have a package. And you could,
and
and you, or,
I
and you-
know,
or we would, yeah, or we would send you a package. That's,
Where's my little
Nah.
birthday card?
Jeez. Did I
yeah,
get
that
you
was my
caught?
oversight.
Am I still a member?
That's fine.
In this particular,
Oh, okay,
that was my mistake.
So why don't we, at least for the 5 of us, state what we'd like to receive in terms of blueprints, right? So I heard Mr. Menard wants full-size blueprints.
For prints only, documents I can live with
Right.
on the laptop.
What would you like?
Are we talking about the maps or?
11 by 17 or full-size plans.
You get a choice of, yeah, full-size, which is
Yeah.
E-size, right? Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
So when they have stuff, okay, so he likes that.
You want the big,
He wants the E. I'll take the 11 by 17s, thank you,
Okay.
which is B.
I like the full size.
Yeah, you-
11 by 17.
that's right, you guys are all,
Distorted.
what did Dave say?
Full size.
Full-size, okay.
They were like extra large full size.
The extra large.
yeah.
Bold print.
I usually send out both.
And we can
Actually,
check.
if they're gonna be electronic.
My guess is that Jeff was,
If they're gonna be
if I had to guess, Jeff is gonna want
electronically
full-size
also,
as
then
well.
11 by 17 is fine, because then if you see something, you can go on
Well-
electronically and blow it up.
Well, sometimes the print on 1117 can be lost.
If it's not, yeah, it depends on how, if it wasn't created digitally.
Yeah, you want it on the size of paper that the scale is gonna work.
So
Except for
I
Gary.
say, use your judgment.
Right.
If 1117 is sufficient to read everything that we can read or need to see, then I'm fine with it. He'll need to blow up, you know, a full sheet of paper.
Well, it won't, so the plans that we
Well, we usually
receive
get mixed.
are not 11 by 17. Those are, anything you're gonna get 11 by 17 is a reduced plan, not to scale.
Okay, so.
They need to
I would
be to
say
scale.
prints. is
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
would be looking for.
Yeah.
And that's what I understood.
Right,
That's what I understood you said, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, and even the 1117s are to scale, but it's just been shrunken.
The scale.
No, they're not.
Scales all messed up.
Oh, does it?
Technically,
Yeah, once,
I
yeah, no, that, yeah, yeah.
have software on here to produce whatever size drawing I want, and they're all to scale. But that's okay, I get it. I'll still take the 1117.
1117 isn't
I'm-
even a half scale, it's like 45% or something.
Yeah, it's like 44/7, yeah.
Size, it's all E-size drawings.
You can't-
When you're trying to sell something and it matters,
Oh, it's too small, it's too small, yeah, I get that.
yeah.
Yeah, I catch you. Anyways, okay, so now we get those preferences, we're gonna find some time to spend on, at which, well, by the way, this is not gonna be a lengthy process to get converted to electronic.
I'm actually, I'd love to learn.
I mean, it's as simple as, you know, you're gonna highlight something, right-click, and add a link, and, yeah, it's gonna be good.
Neither do I, he's gonna show us.
Might be me, might be someone in my person in my company that does most of the tech writing is in Winnipeg, so it won't be David, unless I set up a remote meeting for you. Yeah. Did we have some other things?
There was just one item at the end, which is an administrative subdivision. Now, I don't
Excuse me?
know if the board is used to getting a report from the planner with regard to administrative subdivisions, but by statute, I'm supposed to report to you monthly if I approve an administrative subdivision. I report to you.
We heard this, or we talked about this at our
Right.
last meeting.
Right, but we don't get the follow-up to remind us.
This came in front of us, there were no boxes checked.
Right.
Right.
I think if, why wouldn't you share that with us?
No, it makes sense. It
Well,
closes it out.
I'm required to tell you,
Yeah,
Right.
so,
We're gonna keep the requirement active.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. The other thing that Jeff and I talked to the planner about is to give us more visibility into what's coming, right? Because normally we don't get anything until you have a certified application or whatever you call it, right? And it'd be nice if we could start seeing, here are some projects coming, where they are located, just a summary of it. Because that gives us instead of seeing everything, we have a project here, and we have a project here.
Also, so that
And you start seeing,
you can do that drive-by, you can do your.
exactly, right. And it might be a month or two before it comes to us for, master plan. But at least we know it's there, because it may just give us things to think about, even in terms of another active project that's in the same area. But you do something and then you go, oh, geez, now there's this other one. Oh, now there's this other one. We've had that happen with some of our solar power plants, so, where you work on one, and you work on it as an island, and then you find out that another one's being proposed 2 months later that's 100 yards away. And, that might have an impact on how we view things, right? So we are gonna get more visibility for projects. Plus, it's just nice to see what our pipeline of, I view that, it's almost like from a business, that's our pipeline of business, of new projects, and then we can get a status on them and where they are in the process, and when we can expect to have it. It allows us to do better planning of the planning board agendas, too.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I've been trying to keep an open line of communication. I
Yep.
think we've been doing that, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is one thing now, too, like for this last one, we were given advance notice, and I'll say first right of refusal on the agenda, which is nice to have, so we can see that in advance and maybe arrange it. One of the things we did was arrange it based on what we thought would take, how much time.
Yeah.
And then there was, of course, the change for the higher ups, but we didn't know in advance.
Well, things happen on the fly,
Yeah.
there's
deal with
nothing
that
to
as
do
it
about
comes,
that. Agreed. One other thing that I wanted to mention as part of the process, when I was, Bobby and I was sitting down and discussing some things is, and you'll notice tonight I had the attorney bring an affidavit of notice.
Yeah.
The process for notice has been kind of bifurcated, and I don't think that's a good thing. Bobby's been responsible for placing ads on behalf of applicants, and they've been responsible for doing the notice. So, a couple of things. The town should either be responsible for the ad and the notice, or should not be responsible for the ad or the notice. So, in talking with Bobby, the decision, and I'm used to leaving the onus on the applicant. We provide them with whatever the requirements are, we provide them with the ad. It's their responsibility to put the ad in the paper, it's their responsibility to send the certified, and then what I would like from them, submitted to the board either prior to the meeting or at the meeting, is an affidavit of notice from the individual who placed that ad, so that we are covered. If there's ever an appeal or something, the notice, there's an affidavit in there, they filed it, we are not responsible for it. So any errors, any omissions, any lateness, or anyone left out is not the town's responsibility. And David, I spoke with David about that, he's all on board.
was, the application.
Sorry about that,
The
yeah.
application had to come from the property, so technically.
Okay, I understand, right. But it's something that's being funneled through as
It's just
opposed
an
to a,
exception, I just would like to,
yeah.
just to make sure that we're allowed to entertain those exceptions from time to time.
I would, I mean, of course.
About the Heritage Association thing, I did a lot of those things just because I do them every day and I know how to do that. That was really a town clerk function. We advertised 3 weeks in a row. I did the ad and then we worked on it together. But it's actually something that really should just go through one place so that we're not trying to coordinate
And the one place is
the town
Town
clerk's
clerk,
office.
okay.
With a zone change like that. So,
So earlier, we were discussing, prior to the meeting, Gary and I and Bobby were discussing rules and regulations and written standards and zone changes, and that's what this is. And Bobby certainly wouldn't have any problem, nor would I, assisting someone who needed assistance. Let's just make that clear. The responsibility for zone changes, notice, requirements, and anything that needs to be done is clearly in the clerk's office by statute. And a zone change gets advertised 3 weeks, 3 successive weeks prior to the meeting, including the week of the meeting. That's, you know, we'll resolve that internally between planning and the clerk's office and the attorneys, but actually Bobby went out of her way, and I'm sure that's appreciated, to do something on behalf of something that
Very much so.
was not really
Right.
her responsibility.
it just, sometimes it causes confusion.
Right.
When we have two different groups trying to
Yeah.
figure out who's doing
So really,
what.
they should kick it off with the clerk's office, and if the clerk wants some assistance, they might stop in
Right,
to see
well,
you.
like they would ask me to create the map,
There you
and
go.
I created
Yep.
the map. And then
Perfect.
they would do the advertising.
Okay,
Okay.
terrific. Yeah, thanks,
All right.
Marty. Appreciate that.
So one other item, you know, as you know, we have our second alternate position is vacant now, as of a few days ago, I guess. So I'm unaware what the process is, and other than it being informal and submit a name somewhere if you're interested, and then town council votes on it. But there are things like that that, again, we don't have a process for doing it. I always found it odd, even in my own case when I joined, as well as when other joins, that we, you know, we sit on this panel, you know, this board, and then suddenly someone new appears, you know, sometimes without us knowing it. I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, but I thought it might be good to entertain a little conversation. And if there is something we can do, even if it's just a letter, a memo of recommendation to, I guess in this case, the town council for improving the process.
Did we do this last year? Or 2 years ago? I feel like we said, yeah, I feel like we've
We did
gone
try.
down this path. And
We did,
It had to be at least 3 years, it had to be prior to my,
it was,
prior to myself being on the board, because I don't remember.
it was, yeah.
That ever being done.
In
And-
fact, yeah, you would have been like the first one done after that. But you're right, it did fall on deaf ears, but, you know,
Right now, the town council just, or the town clerk advertises that we have all of these
Right.
openings, and if you're interested, you apply, and you have to submit your, supposedly submit your resume, and then the it's up to the town council to decide, just based on that evidence, who they're gonna appoint.
Right.
But I think it's a great idea for the planning board if, you know,
I think it would be great if we could see who's applied.
we.
We're not gonna have any voting, right, I'm not,
And maybe make a recommendation to the
there
town
you go.
council?
Would be
Certainly
even-
give, let's, you know, score it a little bit. I think we could give some input, especially some of us may have, you know, actual experience working with the person or have some knowledge about them that they don't have. And so it'd be strictly in an advisory role, because you know, we don't have any power over those appointments, but I think that would be worthwhile. And that might be more palatable to them than what we proposed in the past.
Does maybe Mark have some for instances, since you've been around different planning boards, how things like that are handled?
They're typically handled in a political fashion.
Right, and we know that. But is there precedent somewhere that we could point to for the board at least being able to, as you say, acting in an advisory, you know, knowing in advance who are the candidates and,
I'm not aware of it,
you know?
no.
Now, the candidates, I'll say this, and this is probably, you know, just to anticipate the feedback we'll get. my understanding or my expectation is that anyone that expresses interest in sitting on board, that would be public knowledge, right? If there's an actual process for submitting your name, putting your hat in the ring, right? I would think that has to be public knowledge, which means at any given time, we could go out and look and see who is.
I would think if there's a public request and someone is submitting a resume as a matter of interest for that request, that
Yeah.
would be open for what's called Access to Public Records Act.
Right.
And you can go in the clerk's office and say, you know, I'd like to see what your applications look like, and they would provide that to you.
Right. So I'm just, you know, because they would say, well, you can get it that way. So, yeah, but we, look, you know, I really do think it's worthwhile for us to throw our 2 cents in. This is someone we're going to be working with. And, you know, you want to build a strong team, and so you usually get the team at least involved in the selection process to some extent.
But either way, you know, we could highly recommend somebody. Someone on the council has to nominate the person.
Absolutely. They have to
If
nominate them and
nobody
they have to vote.
nominates them,
Right. And we're not taking that away, but I think
Right.
it's, but on the other hand, our recommendation would also be on the public record.
Just gonna make a comment that I'm the last alternate standing.
You're the last alternate standing, yes. Yes, you are. I did go to bat for her, a prior person that is not interested in coming back, at least at this time, but,
Miss
but I-
Kennedy's not coming back because she's having a baby.
oh, well, good for her.
So I don't think it wasn't because
She's,
she was.
she's gonna have enough problems with screaming infants that she doesn't need us.
When she was giving you a hard time about your age? Oh, was it, she was giving someone a hard time. Or someone was giving her a hard time
Yeah.
about being so young then.
But anyway, so, what do you think of proposing something like that, which is different than what we proposed a few years ago? You know, just saying, let us see, you know, let's take a look at the candidates, get our opinion. You know, use this as an advisory board, let's get our opinion. Mark, you don't have enough experience with the town council to know yet, but in your past, have you worked with other town councils that would be amenable to at least listening to that?
Yeah, matter of fact, I've worked with a town council that's actually begged to have applicants be interested, and have actually asked members of boards, do you know anyone that might be interested? So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
typically, yes.
Have any of you been asked? Because it's been known for some time that Ms. Kennedy was not going to be serving another term. Is it?
I
Right.
didn't know until tonight.
Right. Yeah,
I
so,
didn't know until that.
and I found out a week ago just from randomly running into John, but. Right,
And, you know, it came a time in my life that it was just a perfect time to,
right.
yes, I have.
Oh,
I can do it.
Yeah, and they definitely do recruiting, which is good, but nonetheless, even with this process, though, it would be like, are you interested? Yes, great, submit this,
Correct.
and then follow that process, that's all.
You know, it's a shoe-in, I just said
Right,
that's.
no, and I think that's fine, I think it is good if they tap into people, I mean, that's how, I think a lot of people get on, is because other people know them, they say, I think you could do some good. So the process for that would be to, for us to craft a memo to describe that process, to suggest that process? How about if,
I would say that if the board is inclined, you could write a letter could be written on behalf of the board for the signature of the chairman. We could circulate that informally to the members of the board if they would like to review it. I don't think it really takes any formal action if there's a consensus.
right,
Because it's not really, you're not voting on anything.
so would you, is the board okay with having planner craft that? Yeah, why don't you do that, and that'd be, you know, just in general, it'd be nice to start putting some process in place, getting us involved.
I think they'd really appreciate us sending them a name of someone who's interested, and in that manner,
Well,
you know, I don't know.
Were there no applicants?
no, it's not that there's no, actually, what, I mean, it's what Mark said, I mean, it is a political process, And if you submit a name of someone that they feel is not going to vote on things the way they want them voted on, or that individual wants them voted on, they won't be considered, or they won't get the
They still
nomination.
need to be nominated,
Right.
and it needs to be voted on by the council. so
Right. But I like, to me, the idea is now it's
kind
a little more
of helping
public.
them along.
We're putting our 2 cents in. They can ignore our 2 cents, but if they ignore our 2 cents, well, whether they go with it or not, it's a public record. And that, to me, is the important part. So, and it can point out where we're in agreement, where we're not, and both of those are good things. So, Mr. Menard?
Whether it's a political appointment or not, however we want to view it, after about 3 or 4 months of being on the board, I had discussion with the previous planner and said, I've come to fruition as to what our job is. And the job is being a juror. You listen to the facts and you vote on the facts. It's not something that's personal. It's not, you have to be very blind to anything that you feel that might not be right, but if it's the law, it's the law.
Right. Yeah, and I think this board does a particularly good job of it, including, I think, at times having voted, say, differently than the town, perhaps even the council member that nominated them wanted them to vote, which speaks to the integrity of, because we do that, and I think that's important, and that's,
But as far as it being a political appointment, they're appointed by the town council, but I don't think under political, I've never been
But by-
approached by anybody.
let me,
about
I
an opinion on a.
oh, I have,
You have?
or asked to expedite a project through and that kind of stuff. Of course, I
Well,
said no.
that's, expediting, I guess.
No, but even that, I said, no,
Right.
it's a project like any other, it can stand in
Yeah.
line. But but by political, the way it was put to me by the solicitors is that, the council will build, they want to build the board to represent their perspective. That's the political part of it. They're not going to nominate people that think differently, right? So,
Yeah, I don't.
and that doesn't mean that the board is going to always act that way, and it doesn't mean they're tied to them in any way politically. I mean, when I was on here for not very long, I reminded the council member that nominated me that I did not work for him. So, and, which he understood.
I don't even know who nominated me, but,
But he's the town administrator now, and he
Oh,
still
is he?
talks to me. Yeah. So. As he drives by. Yeah. So, there was I thought there was one other. Well, that was the administrative thing, but I thought there was one other, how we do business, item that we hadn't covered.
As far as who's responsible for getting reviews from town and local agencies.
Oh, yes.
And again, that's one of those things that apparently has been left to the applicant to do. By statute, the administrative officer is supposed to coordinate that. I guess a version of coordination could be to say to the applicant, you gotta go all these agencies and bring the comments back to me. I prefer to have that aspect be in the department, so that the department and staff of the department are reaching out to water, sewer, fire, building, whatever other internal agency. So we'll take in the application, we will circulate it to them, we will request the comments, and we will compile those comments and implement and import those comments into our recommendation. A lot of times what I'll find is an agency will not respond to an applicant. The applicant comes to the department, or things come trickling in. Something might come in a week and something in 3 weeks. With regard to state agencies, the onus is on them to go to that state agency, make application. That's got to come to us. But I think internal staff should be communicating with internal staff And so I would like to change that practice also.
I think that's a great idea, because that's also unbiased. It's coming through consistently for each project and stuff. But, I mean, it is, and from what you said, it sounds like it's really not a lot of additional work, because they're all coming back to you anyway.
It's not a lot of additional work, because as a matter of fact, what I would do is I would write up a little summary of the project. I would give them what I see in it and send it to them and say, what say you? You know, so they kind of get, if an applicant goes directly to a director or, you know, the fire chief or whatever, they're gonna have a conversation. I'm not gonna be involved in that conversation. If I do a little cover memo, or I do a little summary of the project and give my observations, and I might even include some of the things that like for the fire department, for example, I'll read their regulations, see what they need, and I'll say, from what I see, this project needs a hydrant or 2 hydrants.
Right.
Whatever their standard is. I actually met with the fire chief the other day and sent it to them, and they may come back and say, no, it only needs 1, or it needs 3, I don't know.
See, and the beauty of
We'll
this,
be in communication.
the beauty of this is when you send the department heads this document, it's gonna have a list for fire, DPW, et cetera, and they'll just click on that link and go to their section.
That would even.
Because you're
when
gonna be so good at
When
this.
you get me doing that, that'll be,
You're gonna
So-
make it easy for them.
Would that require an ordinance change, though? Because when we would first saw this and we were asked to certify it complete, Jeff brought up that in the ordinance, it says that the applicant is responsible for doing that
Right.
stuff. And that was one of the reasons we said no, and that the buildings weren't shown.
It's on the
So I know Tom used to
checklist.
do that, and Jeff made the comment that I know Tom has done it as a courtesy. However, this is what the ordinance says.
I think you're talking about the regulation
It's
as
the
opposed to an
checklist.
ordinance, right?
Oh, the
Checklist.
checklist.
On the checklist.
Yes.
The checklist is in the regulations, and the checklist says, I don't know precisely what the checklist says, but the checklist probably says comments from these agencies. I don't know if it
There
says.
was
No,
something
it
he
says-
read.
It does say something about the applicant's
Yeah, there was
responsibility.
something he
I
read
would-
that.
If that's the
Yeah.
case, I would like to amend and change that, because I would prefer to have that process be the responsibility of the department. For the
Right.
Which
reasons-
makes sense.
For the reasons that I'm giving.
So who would have the authority to amend that?
If it's in the development review regulations, that authority lies solely with you.
Right, okay, so,
So what I would say is, I think Bobby and I had a discussion the other day about working on things and amending things. If we go through, and I think maybe if we see a few things that we might want to amend in the regulations, we need to advertise that there's a process that we go through. So we would do that, and we would provide that to you for your consideration at a future meeting. And we can amend our regs to,
okay, yeah, so if you
To
could
meet-
take that action item.
Yeah, we would,
We'll
yeah.
take care of it quickly.
That might be an opportunity to address some other items in the regulations.
True, yeah, anything else that's, yeah, we should take a look at those ourselves. So there was one other item that I'd like to get the board's opinion on. I think we should be able to sit 7 people at this board, at this table. So I'd like to have us send a memo to the town council, whoever's appropriate, to have them modified, to have like extension put on the end of each, so that we don't have the issue we have like when you're hanging off the end, or that we've had in the past. And if they say, we'll find a way in the wording to say, is it legally incorrect, or is it just really, to me, wrong to have the alternates sit at a separate table? To me, everybody should sit here, because they're gonna get questions from, there's discussion here, and there's questions put out this way. They shouldn't be coming from 2 parts of the room. We shouldn't treat alternates as second-class citizens, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if there's a formal way to nip that in the bud, but I would like us to make a formal request to at least get a quote on what it would take. My understanding is they got a very good deal on this, because it's that ACI labor, from the ACI woodworking shop to make these.
High school has two new shop construction.
There we go. But someone should be able to match this pretty
3D
nicely.
printer, they could-
There you go.
We'll see it in a year, but they can 3D print the
Yeah.
components.
So was this set up for 5, because that's the normal boards are 5? Like
I don't
town
know.
council,
I think,
zoning board, and
I think they're looking at.
no, zoning
Zoning has alternates too.
has
I
alternates,
think
so
they're
there's
thinking
also
just
7.
about the town
Yeah, I think they're just, imagine that.
Okay. Point
So-
taken.
Yeah, because most of the others have more than 5, you know? Okay, so is that something you'll draft as well for us?
We'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman.
Would you like me to send a little drawing of proposed design for it?
We will not be including any schematics, just a
Okay.
formal request.
It is pretty simple, exactly. So, thank you for indulging me, this is just bugging me, you know?
Other things in this room.
Oh, yes. That seems like an easy one. That should be an easy one. How's that?
That should be the easy football.
Exactly. All right, so I think we're pretty good with our conversation about procedural stuff, and we'll change the way this document works, but combine the best of the best, and does that sound good?
Yep.
Great. And we don't have to vote on any of this, right? We sat here, we nodded heads, we're good? All right. Wonderful. So,
Motion to adjourn?
there it is. No,
Yeah,
we covered that.
He just has to tell us.
That's just, well, no, see, that's it. From now on, he's gonna tell us when the administrative actions are taken, which in the past, we've just known they happen. But now we formally close the loop, if you will, right? Which is nice. Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a second. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nobody. We are.